they wouldn't even take my complaint without me doing a mediated session with my harasser.
The world is obsessed with fast-track success. It's easy to think that people become successful overnight. But let's face it, more often than not, what we see on social media is total BS. I'm here to look past the perception of perfect success and focus on life's detours, perceived mistakes, and even wrong choices, and understand the real road traveled up the career ladder. After all, we're all effing up. Arielle Kilroy is co-founder and CEO at Dado, an employee experience management startup. Previous to founding Dado, Arielle has been a Webby Honoree Product Leader at a variety of different organizations, from Epic Records to Sierra Club to Small Improvements. She's a conference speaker and mentor, as well as a trainer at Practical Product.
Hello.
Hello. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to be here with you.
I feel the same. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Why don't you start by talking about what you're up to in your life today?
Absolutely. I founded a startup with another co-founder. And one of the things that has been part of my founding journey is that I've had to take on the commercial role, which is a fancy word for sales. and, and I had no previous experience in that. And this is actually where I spend most of my time these days. And since it's end of year and we're a B2B, lots of people are in budget trying to get contracts over the line before the end of the year. And that's so.
And what is Dado? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So we are an employee experience management platform. This is a new category of software, similar to how marketing and product teams have tools that help them design and iterate a customer experience. We bring a purpose-built solution to people-facing teams, mostly HR, but sometimes IT, sometimes sales, sometimes engineering, anybody who's running a people program. And we give them the tools to be able to spin up a people program, see how it's performing, and then be able to iterate on that with speed.
And where are you located?
I'm in Berlin, Germany.
How long have you been in Berlin?
January 16th, it'll be 8 years. Can't even believe it. We thought we'd come here for a year, maybe 2.
If we could transport you back to when you were a young child, I'm curious, like in those formative years, if there's anything that you can recall about your childhood that translates very well, whether it be positive, negative, that translates into kind of how your career has landed or how your career progressed, and if there's any correlation there.
There's probably like 3 themes that kind of carried over a lot for me.
Mm.
One is I wanted to change the world. I really wanted to make the world a better place. And then I would say that in many ways, I was a product of the time in which I hope is one of the last generations of when I was raised. I should have probably majored in math or science.
Mm.
I'm good in these spaces, but I was really discouraged from pursuing those actively because it wasn't said like this, but it was basically like this, that like women just like my brother got the video game system, but I did. It was just not the space that I was encouraged to go down.
Yeah.
And I think that has played a very interesting role in how it's manifested for me years later. And then I would say, thirdly, I did not fit into the traditional system. So I've been a make my own rules person for a long time. So I graduated high school early, even though I had one of the worst attendance records in the county of all time.
Of the county.
Yeah. My mom was a teacher and the school was not challenging for me.
Mm.
The whole system just felt like, it wasn't designed for someone like me. So I would just miss school and then I would come and get all of my work and I would just do it in 4 hours and then I would miss school again, which taught me that there are many ways to achieve success.
Mhm.
Because the definition of success here was graduating, right?
Yeah.
Historically, in these types of school situations, it's like success is, can you fit into the program of average?
Right.
And that is valuable for most kids, but and there are other skills you learn in school, sharing and just
You become a well-rounded individual. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. But it can create a lot of challenges. I had one of my best friends when I was a tween. He I think at the time had one of the highest recorded IQs in the state of Florida. And he was a heroin addict at 12. Who's a heroin addict at 12?
Oh, my hair is
Yeah.
standing up. That's
Yeah.
that's a parent's worst nightmare.
I think his parents contributed to that, but I think that the school system could have treated him differently and that would have changed his trajectory in life.
Yeah.
And I had a different level of support at home where my mom was very much, these are the rules. I will help you break these rules, but this is what success means like for us internally. You must get straight A's or near straight A's. You must perform. If you can do this, then you have proven to me that you know how to manage between these things. And she gave me a lot of freedom outside of that.
Wow. That is an ideal parent situation.
Yeah. She told me what success looked like. If you can do this,
Yeah.
then I'll do all the sick notes you want. It was really motivating for me though, because the thing is then I kept my grades good because the good grades meant freedom.
Yeah, you were given latitude. And
Yeah.
as a child, a teenager specifically, we are designed to test boundaries, to push
Mhm.
and to go beyond. Your mom was like, okay, let's do it, but do it in a safe way.
And I was
So
definitely a challenging teenager. I would say I'm probably still challenging. I think the difference is that I manage my own shit now. I can say that, right?
absolutely.
And there's no one who's like concerned about my safety. There are people who are concerned about my safety, but like they
Yeah.
know that
I
I'm a
understand.
capable person who can manage these things in a different way than when you are a younger person. You don't necessarily understand how big the consequences might be.
I'm very curious to see how these themes show up as we continue to go on. So, you graduated high school early. How did you think about the future beyond? We're trained, broadly speaking, to nail everything down before
Yeah.
you even graduate high school. You got to know what you want to be for the rest of your life, as if that's even
Yeah.
possible. Are you going to go on to further education? What are you going to major in? What are you going to be? And you got to be that forever. What pressures were you feeling and what inklings were you having if you were to answer those questions?
I knew there was never a doubt that I wasn't going to go to university.
Mm.
My mom was a teacher. She valued education a lot. I didn't come from like the economic means where I could go to any university. There was a school I really wanted to go to in New York that I got into, but we couldn't afford. Right, so I ended up going to a state school. And that had pluses and minuses to it, but I honestly ended up choosing my university in the end by the place that I wanted to live. And so I ended up going to University of South Florida until I ended up then changing to something else because I liked Tampa. Of all the cities in Florida, Tampa was the one that resonated with me the most. I'm really passionate about music and has a great music scene.
Okay.
And I had the most fun when I was visiting there, and the most fun when I was going to I'll use the word shows, but concerts probably translates better for most people. And and so I ended up going to University of South Florida because it was in Tampa.
Mhm. And then you said until you changed what you were going to do, what
Oh man,
changed?
talk about the things I shouldn't have done, or I'll say do differently with the benefit of hindsight is how I also talk about. I had this freak out 3 years into my university degree. I was probably like a semester, maybe two away from graduating, debt free because I was on a scholarship there. Then
Oh, wow.
I started out majoring in acting and in fine art, and then I decided I didn't need two pointless degrees, and also I wanted to get tattoos, and at the time you couldn't be an actress and have tattoos.
Yeah.
That, of course, was like I should completely change my entire life course based off the fact that I want to get a
Oh,
tattoo. These are the decisions 17-year-olds make. I stayed with my fine art degree, and I had this meltdown where I was like, I'm not a serious artist because I've gone to this state school and I need to go to a real art school in quotes. And I chose my real art school again by city that I wanted to be in. And then I transferred to Otis College of Art and Design in Los Angeles because I wanted to be in LA. So instead, I decided to spend 6.5 years getting my BFA and go from having no debt to a crippling amount of student loan debt.
when you got to Otis, was it what you had hoped and with LA checking the box that you thought it would check?
I love Los Angeles. There are a lot of things about LA that are super problematic.
Mm.
And when you go from a mid-level city to a giant city, I learned a lot from like what it feels like to be a big fish in a small pond to being a small fish in a giant pond. It's just a very cultural city. There's always things going on in LA,
Yeah.
and I really loved that. And Otis was a very professional school, and I loved that. But I was really naive. Again, all of this is like timing, right? And the fact that I signed student loan paperwork and was told, I was like, do people really, can they really afford to pay this back? And this was still the time where loan officers were getting kickbacks from banks and stuff like that. And I took out an amount of debt to pay for my school. And I worked the whole time. It's not like I was taking it out and living off of it. It was just paying my tuition. And this was completely false. My mom had co signed my loan, so they would have fallen back to her. And that level of responsibility really freaked me out because I didn't want to do that to my mom.
Yeah.
And I was just so naive. That haunted me for well over a decade. And it totally changed the trajectory of my life taking on that amount of debt.
Yeah.
Then they came out with all these different student loans and regulating the interest rates on student loans. I had 9% interest rate on my student
Oh,
loan. Insane. Criminal. And the person who was supposed to be guiding me through this, the student loan officer, was,
laughing behind your back.
yeah, absolutely. There's no way they could have possibly thought that this was in a reasonable amount of debt for somebody who would take on an early stage, like an early art career, could pay off. Just negligent is the way I would describe it.
You said that you managed that for over a decade, well over a decade. When did the resentment about that financial burden really hit you in the face?
Right away, honestly, when I graduated and I started to see what my student loan payments were going to be, I worked full time during the day and then I worked 4 nights a week waiting tables. I had no life. I lived with a bunch of people. I was really
Yeah.
budgeting
Yeah.
and I was hustling. And that was just to be able to make it through.
Man,
Mhm.
that's
And I
rough.
did it for probably maybe first 3 years after I graduated to be able to, until I worked my way up professionally. And one of the big milestones for me was when I finally earned enough from my salary where I could pay my rent and student loan from one job. I lived probably dangerously during that time where it was very like paycheck to paycheck.
Mm.
Then I managed it in different ways, all things I wouldn't recommend to other people. I spent a lot on credit cards,
Mm.
but I was savvy enough to understand that's what I was doing. And then I remember, no one should take this as financial advice. They would have these offers that would come in the mail for 0% interest if you transfer balance. So I would get a balance and I would transfer it and I would have 6 or 12 months where it didn't accrue at 25% interest rate or whatever it was. And I would pay it off. And then I would often do that again
Mhm.
because my life got to a point where I didn't have that wiggle room. So when something went sideways, I would have to. And then I would try to take on like a freelance job or something else to just try to like power through that. And this was probably like another 4 years I lived like that. Mhm.
What challenges did you have when you started your first official job post graduation?
The first off is they offered me this salary, which I thought was like a lot of money. And then when you get your paycheck, you're like, oh my God, this is like not money at
Nothing.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have no idea. I was given things I had to execute on. So I was doing graphic design at a prop house, which
Mm.
is so movies, they like license products. And so when they don't license that, they give you something that will register visually to you as if it is something that you'll recognize, but it's not that. So there'll be like a beer and it'll look like a Budweiser, but it's not a Budweiser because Budweiser didn't pay for placement.
You were there just over a year.
I was doing some freelance design on the side and I was making more money from that than my salary.
Mm.
And I was trying to invest to take my career to the next level. It's very hard to move up in the world of graphic design props. I knew I wanted to get into web design. This was, again, a little bit newer at the time. And I was doing coding and stuff. I taught myself how to code from library books. And I was really interested in the possibilities that the internet provided. This is the year the iPhone came out. And again, at the time, I was very financially motivated because I had this crippling student loan debt. And my life was not sustainable. I had no other options. And I was
Yeah.
really trying to chase the idea of only having one job. So I did the freelance for a bit while waiting tables at night, but then I spent a lot of time getting my coding skills up to the point where I could work professionally as a developer.
Hidden spot, you were there for 6 months. Anything worth noting there in terms of challenges or struggles?
It was my first real development job, and it was cool to do that. I also saw like a lot of things that I wouldn't do there. They had you work on clients that they hire. It was an agency and an agency, and I was doing websites and things around like movie releases.
Mm.
As I did like the first website for He's Just Not That Into You and The Hobbit and stuff to build hype and have something for 3 years before the movie comes out, kind of thing. And so it built my confidence that I could do that and that I was valuable there. But it was interesting to see how it was so optimized. They lost the client that I was working on, and they literally told me Thursday night and they paid me for Friday. And I was, again, under crippling student loan debt. I didn't do anything wrong. They laid off the whole team that had been working on this client. But like, how did you as a manager not understand that the client's at risk? Let me know so I can line some just the impact of my life. And that definitely helped shape me in
Mhm.
choices I made later. It's funny, again, things always end up in weird places. So I had wanted to work in music for a really long time. Epic Records called my university looking for a designer slash developer. And the person there was like, "Oh, I know the perfect person for you." They called me maybe the week after I got laid off. And it was a role I never would have taken because it was less money on the other side of town in Los Angeles. That means a lot.
Yeah.
So, but I took it because I needed to. And that really set me on a very different trajectory. I would call it a blip in my career, which also then made me realize that these things just come and go and they don't define me in the same way that
Mhm.
I was raised with. Like my career is who I am. And of course
Yeah,
it's not.
I think that's how most of us were raised. My worthiness has been very much tied up into what I do, and I don't have any major hobbies that I can speak to. Like, shame on me for not shaping that when I was younger. Um, but yeah, I felt very much, if I don't have my career, what do I have? What am I? So you were at Epic for just over a year and a half. Did you have challenges while you were there?
I was doing design and development again when that was one job, and I really enjoyed it. At some point in time, they were hiring for something they called the new media manager, which is what we basically called the internet back then. And they were struggling to hire for this digital strategy, like product version of a
Mm.
thing. And they just were like, "You have good ideas. You should take this role." And I was like, "I do not want this role. I think that I'm going to have a better career trajectory doing design and development." And they're like, "Here's a bunch of money," which would mean that you would only have to have one job. And I was like, "I will take this job." And that was entirely how I formed this career choice
Yeah.
was please make my life sustainable. And that ended up being a blessing and a curse, as they say. I had a great manager and a horrible manager. I learned that when you worked in music, especially at that time, it was never if you were going to get laid off, it was when. There was like a group of predominantly old white men who were running the labels, and they still all wanted it to be like the heyday of $25 CDs. And of course, it was not. It was just a super toxic culture. And people were being constantly rotated out as they were trying to squeeze dollars from every single thing. Everybody knew that this would be the case. It's
Mhm.
just when it doesn't actually happen. I knew that I was getting laid off because my boss at the time removed me as a friend from Facebook. This was very early days of Facebook where you still needed like an invite, I think. He removed me the morning he flew out, but then he didn't remove my coworker. It was like, "Oh, he's on his way here." And I was like, "That's interesting. I didn't see his post." And then I was like, "Wait, we're not connected on Facebook, but we definitely were." He laid me off, replaced me with two interns in an attempt to, I think, save money and maybe save his job. And then my artist that I was responsible with freaked out. And then they asked me to come back.
What'd you do?
In order for me to come back, because I was still my severance period, I would have had to pay the severance back, which is just shocking amount of competence. His boss was really bad. He had this whole thing where he would any idea that you would come up with on his on his team, if the people above him liked it, he would take credit for it. And if he didn't, he would throw you under the bus. And he would have this thing where he would having bad days. He would scream at people in meetings until you cried. That was the goal. He wanted you to cry, and that would make the screaming stop. There was only one time that I was victim of this where I was targeted and I refused to cry. But as soon as the meeting was over, I went right into the bathroom and bawled. And it
Mm.
just I wasn't really anxious to come back to that.
So from there, this is July 2009. Looks like you're still continuing to do some freelance and you have next listed, okay, go Amanda Palmer more.
Mhm.
Talk to
Yeah.
me about that experience.
I went and, I had a good reputation. My work was good. I was doing innovative stuff. Mm, And I got connected, I think, first to OK Go. They were looking for someone to help drive their digital strategy because their label wasn't doing it.
Mm.
And I was recommended to them, and I ended up working with them. And then I started bringing on some other artists, some small ones that you haven't heard of, or it's unlikely. And then I ended up also bringing in Amanda and running kind of end to end digital strategy for their album releases, music videos, all the kind of stuff that goes into the promotion cycle for an album. I created a consultancy. So I actually attended the small business bureau meetings and formed a company and hired people. And at the time, I was in my mid to late 20s. So it was a pretty big, bold move for me to take. But I was making enough to be able to pay for all my stuff and learning a lot by doing it. I was getting more and more calls from other artists, and they were just like, "Hey, can you do what you did over here for them, but for me?" And I really took this step back. I had an existential crisis a little bit where I realized that I was using someone else's definition of success, that success is a word that I can define for myself, and that I was using someone else's definition. And I was miserable because of that.
Talk to me about the differences between the definitions.
I had definitely inherited the concept of financial success, which at my time, I would say I had a different definition of financial success than I did at that time, but was the definition of success and not like fulfillment or doing interesting work and being challenged and then being in a good environment or any of these other types of things. I had made it in one of the hardest ways to make it, hardest places. I was successful in the music industry. I was a go to person for rock stars. I could go to the Grammys. I could go to MTV. Like I could do the things. And behind me, there was $500 people who would be glad to take that position. And it took me a really long time to understand I should be happy. Many people want what I have. And I worked so hard to be here. Why do I hate every moment of it? Not every moment. That's
Generally, yeah.
like, why am I unhappy? And I came to the conclusion that I was using somebody else's definition of success, which meant I had to define what success was for me, which was it sounds silly in hindsight, but at the time was a really revolutionary thought for me.
I don't even think I heard the word success and any definition of it and the fact that I could own my own definition of it ever, particularly sub 25. And so you're raised in the factory, so to speak, to think just like this.
But it's not like a word like table. It doesn't have a very specific meaning. So
Yeah.
it's up to us to decide what success is for
That's right.
ourselves.
I imagine it wasn't like you woke up one morning and you realized that this probably happened more gradually over time. And so you did the okay, go Amanda Palmer more for just shy of 3 years and transitioned then to Chapman, Kubine, Adams, Hussey.
Mhm.
Talk to me about that transition.
Yeah, I'll roll it up into Sierra Club because I would call that my nonprofit space.
Okay.
So at some point, I came to the conclusion that I was selling pop music to teenagers. And then I had gotten into music because I wanted to change the world. And that's not what I was doing. It's very important for me to note, not that they'll ever listen to it, but Amanda is a brilliant person. And I learned a lot from her, as are like the OK Go guys. They both collectively treated me so well and gave me so much freedom. That was There are many failures I've had in life. That was not one of them. It was just not what I wanted to do anymore. And especially after that, people who were coming up behind them, these other really big artists that you definitely know, but were like asking me to do things that were just not interesting. That I would have been taking for the money and not because I was excited about them. And I really wanted to go back to, as part of this exploration of what a success means to me, I wanted to go back to doing something to change the world.
Mm.
And so I decided I wanted to get a job in nonprofit. I also decided that I needed to step away from LA for a period of time where I would never leave. And so I just was like, I'm going to apply to nonprofit jobs and I'm going to see where the world takes me. And that is how I ended up at CCAH, which is actually a consulting firm. And then Sierra Club pulled me in to start and build out their digital product department. I was in the East Bay, but the office was in San Francisco.
Was it as rewarding as you hoped?
Overall, I would say yes. I had tons of bad days there, just like you do anywhere.
Sure.
This was one of the things that I really learned about myself during that time is that when the work feels like it matters, when it feels like I'm making a difference, that it compensates for a lot of other stuff. I got a lot from that. I also had an incredibly supportive boss there who really taught me how to be a senior leader and mentor me in a way that I would have, that accelerated my career in a way that I would have probably struggled to do in other places. I did experience a lot of other challenges. Like on my first day, I think I called a meeting with the head of marketing, the head of design, and I walked in and they thought I was the intern and asked me to get them coffee. And I was like, I called this meeting. Yeah.
Not a great feeling to start.
No, I had tons of interesting things. We'll call them interesting things now. People who would give me random versions of them, gave me unsolicited life advice. I moved to DC with my partner, and one of them was like, "Are you sure he's worth it? Do you think he actually loves you?" And I was like, "Who are you? You are not my dad. Like, I didn't even ask you for your opinion. Just keep it to yourself, man." And I have 100 of these experiences, which was, I'll say, better than when I was in music, where everybody would get drunk and try to hit on me.
Mm.
Was that better? But this is like
Like
the
you're choosing what you do based on the lesser of the evils. Like,
I don't want to make excuses for them. The behavior was totally unacceptable. And there was tons of times where it way was like just I'm confident none of those people would do those things now.
mm,
I also didn't push back on it in the same way that I would now because I didn't feel like I had the power
of course.
and even maybe the vocabulary. Like I felt viscerally uncomfortable and I couldn't even say why.
You were
But
also under financial pressure. And if you said something, that meant your job was at risk, which meant you were under the weight of your bills, which meant you couldn't survive.
I mean,
So, of course, you were going to use your voice.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, why did you leave?
I wanted to get out of the American bubble. I lived all over the US. I never got to do a semester abroad. I never did like a real travel or anything like that because I just didn't come from that economic background. And I just really wanted to have the experience of what it meant to not be within the system that I had known, even if it was for a short period of time. And I had a previous team member who had moved to Berlin and I talked to him and he was telling me all about how Berlin was expanding its tech scene and you're able to get visas. And I was like, maybe this could be an option for me. And there's a lot of opportunity that kind of created itself. So my partner and I we were living in DC and then we decided to move to Berlin for a year, maybe 2 years.
Did you have a job lined up before you went?
Now, actually both had really, I would say, the kind of jobs that many people would describe as very successful. I was running a whole department. He was running like this huge project team. We both quit. He had some interesting freelance opportunities and like things that would help over there, but nothing that would be long term or pay the bills for both of us.
The
It was like,
irony in that when you had been tied to having to have a job for so long, and now you have this freedom where you can be like, well,
I was like,
thanks.
let me tell you all the things I did wrong. So I moved to Berlin thinking, oh, I'll just get a comparable job here. I have some money saved up. I was in a much more comfortable financial position.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it'll be fine over there. And then I came to Berlin and I was like, wait, you make how much here? Like the sticker shock of the salaries was like, I can't afford to live here. I can't because in Germany, most higher education is free. Actually, they pay you to go to school because they like to have an educated population.
Mm.
And so the salaries here are much lower because no one has student loan debt. So the system isn't designed for someone who's coming from the US. This is why there's just less Americans in Europe working than there are the Europeans in the US. So it was a really challenging time. My partner had his freelance work and he's doing some really interesting consulting work, but it wasn't paying the bills.
Yeah.
But it was a cool opportunity and I just wanted, I was like, oh, it's fine. We moved here in January 2016. And now 8 years later, I'm still here. And there's plenty of ups and downs.
You landed at Mozilla, which is quite different, I have to assume, than CR Club.
Yes.
Talk,
Yes and no. Yeah.
talk to me about what it was like to start work in a foreign country. Was there culture shock? What kind of hurdles did you have to jump over as you were getting acclimated?
Yeah. The first one is I was starting in a country whose language I don't speak, and German is an incredibly challenging language. I went there with basically no understanding of German and then had to learn to navigate the entire legal and social system. And I was coming from a huge point of privilege. I'm like the kind of worker they want because I'm a high income tech worker. And if I had come from a different background, I would have had an even harder time. And it helped me see actually so much of the things that we think work one way actually can work many ways. It was interesting because I wanted to have this experience of being in this foreign country. And then I ended up working at an American company because American companies pay more. That was a very enlightening experience because getting the Californians up and working before 10 a.m. was such a challenge. And they would schedule meetings that would go until 9, 10 p.m. my time. And then if I wouldn't be in the office at 10 a.m. local time, I was like slacking off. So I was working from like 10 to say 4 or 5 p.m. when California would sign on. And then I would have like 4 or 5 hours of meetings. It was brutal.
You're working all the time zones.
All the time zones. Yeah. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and check Slack because decisions would be made that impacted my work in the middle of the night because California was working. And that if I didn't see them or step in, I would inherit the decision and it would take me weeks of work to undo.
And there was a German team other than just you, I have to assume, but
There's a
it
whole
didn't
Berlin
matter.
office. Yeah, there was a whole Berlin office. I was one of very few Americans there, but it was the most toxic place I ever worked. And I'm very honest about that.
And you attribute that to,
I would attribute that to a company who didn't understand what their purpose was.
mm,
Mozilla's model is they have this internet browser that is losing market share every year, and they make most of their money off of their contracts with people who provides ads while they fight against the ad experience online. And they struggle to recreate this sort of success similar for honestly to music of the CD days when they were like the biggest browser. And the identity crisis that Mozilla, I think, was going through at the time, as well as what I would say, like the general tech landscape was that processing moment they had where they were trying to figure out what it means to be grown ups, we'll say, really created this moment where it was super toxic. And the kind of company that is not doing well does not make the best decisions. And then if you add in a really toxic work culture, top of that, it was brutal.
I've experienced tech that I describe as beer and ping pong companies where like we have all these great perks. Maybe if you focus less on those perks, you could actually be a great company. Did that exist at Mozilla, but also in Germany?
Yeah, they've all seen the TV show, right? But there was still more jadedness in the office because being told how to do things for a German market or those who didn't serve that market, this is how it works. And it's actually the whole world is in California. And also, there was a lot of challenges. I think it was multidimensional is the best way I can describe it. Because the Germans were always bitter about the Americans, thinking like they knew everything and they were somehow better. And then being in a satellite office that like people just didn't care about and would mock was
Yeah.
very challenging. But then also I was on a team that wasn't well respected because honestly, and then the whole culture layered on top of that made it very challenging to have a path out of that.
What
Yeah.
was HR stance, the people team stance at the time? Were they present? Were they on the defense?
They couldn't keep a chief people officer to save their life, which is probably a good indicator of where they were at. HR was toxic. So I had to report someone for harassment. And the HR person at the time, and this is, you really see the difference between like old school HR, which I would call risk management, and new
Mhm.
school HR. And I was working with old school HR person who told me that, and you gotta love the Germans because we were having this media session and the person who was harassing me and I outlined everything that was happening. First of all, they wouldn't even take my complaint without me doing a mediated session with my harasser, which is already what? They literally wouldn't even file it.
That is so cringy.
Yes.
Cringy is not even the word. As an HR professional, it's like no
Worse.
investigation.
Worse. Yeah,
First?
forced into a mediated session with this person when I specifically said I did not want to. On that call, I outlined everything that happened, and this person was like, everything she said happened and happened the way she said it happened, which should have been the first thing. That would like,
It
crap, right? And the HR
like
person, like,
done, fired,
fine, perfect, right? Like, and the HR person was like, well, maybe you need to like understand how challenging his life is right now. And I was like, what?
his life.
Yes,
What?
yes, yes. And I asked to be removed from this person's sphere of influence, we'll say. And I was told no, just shocking amounts of
Worse.
yeah. And then another person and this HR person tried to plot against me. It was like a whole thing. There are so many things happening. They had started this women in leadership pilot program in the organization. And what we realized when all of a sudden we were connected with each other and had a platform to discuss was that there were really systemic issues with the way women were treated in the organization. And when we brought these issues to leadership, they shut the program down.
What was the explanation of why the program was shut down?
I don't even remember. Maybe it wasn't supporting business goals or something, but it was 100%. We realized we've created a legal challenge for ourselves and we do not want to continue this. That's the way it read.
Oof.
Then they also got rid of like the diversity officers.
What was the tipping point that caused you to leave?
It was obviously not going to get better. I really got to the point where I was like, I worked so hard to have what I'll loosely call my points of privilege at this point. I had some financial stability. What does it look like for someone behind me? I have no kids. Who stands up to the big bad wolf? There's actually incredibly awesome people there who do good work. There's no secret if you look through the amount of leadership changes they've had. If you tell people that you're at your limit and that you can't enforce that, then it doesn't really mean anything. So I left and I made it painful when I left.
Do you feel resolute in how you left?
I had a lot of anger. I don't believe in the concept of a meritocracy, but I felt like I lost a little bit of like my youthful perspective on the world where I thought if you're right, if you work hard enough, if you have the proof, I had lots of evidence. And it wasn't just the harassment. There was a whole thing happening on where there was like millions of dollars being wasted. And I tried to bring that up and I was silenced. It was just like all sorts of things. And I really thought if you are trying to do the right thing, that you will always persevere. And it was the first time in my life where I learned that lesson so intensely. That is not true. And like, it's just not true. And I don't know if I was just protected or I just believed in this dream of how I wanted things to be, but it the thing that hit me the hardest when I left was how much it shook my worldview about being like the right thing will always win, that the truth and justice will always win. And also, I don't think of myself as someone who gives up. And I felt like I gave up there. I felt like I had to give up to protect my own mental sanity. And yeah, those were the hard parts. It shook me to the core of my belief system, honestly, and took me a long time and a lot of therapy to recover from it.
Huh, that's rough. I've been in that exact situation, but in a situation where the same thing, feeling rocked because I thought if I speak up, say something, do the right thing, protect, that's what's needed. And that just gets diluted and covered up. And you're like, what was the point of all that? Why did I even, it's so debilitating, frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I so fundamentally believed in the mission there. And I just saw so many paths to success. And I don't know, it was shocking to be treated so poorly.
Mm,
And everyone agreed my work was fantastic. So there's no issues with my work. It had everything to do with all the other things.
right.
And the second I brought something to them, I was the problem.
So you moved on
Mhm.
and you have a very sexy title that came next. Chief Product Officer.
Yes.
Small improvements. Did it feel sexy?
My film improvements is incredibly small, like in size. So was under leveled at Mozilla, which is a whole other problem. But I had been doing this job for a long time, and I had been in this very senior leadership role in Sierra Bob, and so it was good to go back to a place where I had more control. I actually thought when I started Mozilla, oh, it'd be nice to go back to being more like IC instead of running a department. And then I was like, okay, actually, I hate this. Like, I love being an IC, but like,
Sure.
I miss the like high level strategy. So it was nice to go back to that. And the cool thing about being in a smaller org is that I had influence over more domains than just product. I was working with CS, I was working with sales,
Mm,
marketing, and I got to really work together to make a really big difference in a small company.
mm,
And that was really cool. That was really cool.
mm. You were there for a year and 3 months. Why did you leave?
So it was one of the biggest disagrees and commits of my actually was probably the biggest disagree and commit of my professional life. The founder and owner of the company, when COVID hit, he decided to take that company and with, I'll say, a different direction than I would have taken it at that time because he was very risk adverse.
Mm,
And I would not have made that same choice, but I really respected that it was his choice to make. And so I helped him execute that transition,
mm.
which is purposely vague because I want to respect the choices he made there.
Yeah.
But I'm very proud of how I left that company. I respect him a lot. I was very happy with the work. While I was there, we got to like the highest ARR of the company. We crossed big milestones. We released new products. Really proud of the team. Really set that company up for success. And then it was just the time for me to go.
Mm. You take on CEO, CPO role at Dado.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I don't know what I was thinking. Dado came out of actually a problem that we were hearing from the HR leadership of Small Improvements.
Mm,
We were investigating where to take the Small Improvements product, what we wanted to add to the suite of it. And there's a whole process here for determining like needs that need and like what is available to market and blah, blah, blah. So this kind of like loose idea of being able to manage a people program came up at that time. It was absolutely not the right space for Small Improvements to play in.
mm,
We had a whole bunch of curated options. This is not even what they chose. These are the ones that we feel are strong. But it needs to be part of it needs to make sense with the product offering, with the core product offering that they had. But it was just a real interesting problem.
mhm.
And then COVID hit and it became this need that people had because they'd been relying so much on office culture to solve these problems.
Yeah.
And then they couldn't do that anymore. One would argue it never really solved the problem, but it made it less symptomatic, we'll say, or less obvious. And I had someone I worked with at Small Improvements who was also leaving at the same time I was. And we were like, let's just do this. We have nothing else going on. Let's do this for a while until it doesn't make sense for us to do it anymore. And we were just like, we're going to let this product let us know where it wants to go.
Keeps you up at night.
A great question. Building a company is hard. I was really, even in the first like year or 2 years, I was quite naive about it. You have these ambitions and then you have a budget, and those things don't always match. We were never the company who wanted to raise 100 million and do that. Honestly had thought that the startup ecosystem was completely broken and that there's no way a company that has a slide deck is worth $1 billion.
Mm,
Lectured again by old white men about how I was naive and I didn't understand how to make a successful business. But I wanted to build something that solved a real problem and could be financially successful doing that. And I'm still doing that. I can see where we could be in 10 years. You know what I mean? I want to be there today. All the things associated with getting there are the things that keep me up.
mm.
I have spent a lot of time working on my mental health, the books, the therapy, all the things like practicing it. I do those things and they help. Otherwise, I would never be able to do this journey.
When did you know that you needed to focus on your mental health?
Mozilla.
Mm,
While I was at Mozilla, my mom was sick and my partner's mom was sick in very different ways. The balancing of taking care of all the things plus dealing with a toxic work environment was really challenging. I'm a super high performer. So I would do all the things, but anytime that anything would go wrong, it was like a cascade of, I didn't have space in my life for things to go off script or be spontaneous. I was just trying to keep everything afloat. And I had a really bad panic attack For sure, my biggest one, it was my body telling me, "You cannot keep going the way that you're going," to the point where you're literally having a physical reaction.
Mhm.
And I said to myself, I don't listen to this. What do I listen to? And that really set me down a whole path of going to therapy for real for the first time, really investing in reading all the books, all the blogs, all the videos, putting dedicated time into thinking about what I wanted, really
Mm.
just understanding that it was similar to the way that I treated my physical health and the way that I worked out every day. I did yoga, I did lifting, I did all of that, that I need to treat my mental health with the same intention. And being a high performer sort of covered that up for a long time.
It sounds like you were pretty accepting of the fact that this is something you should do for yourself. Was there a period of avoidance before acceptance?
Yes and no. I still had the practicalities of a day-to-day life that was very demanding and needed me, so it was, like, hard to figure out how to make the time.
Yeah.
And socialized medicine here is still has a long way to go in how they think about therapy.
Mm.
So getting therapy in Berlin, like it's literally considered like a crisis here because there's not enough therapists, is a very challenging process that I would describe as, imagine you walk into, like, you go into a hospital and you're like, I broke my leg. And they're like, great, we're happy to help you. You just need to walk 2 miles to the other side of campus. And you're like, how do I do that? I just said I broke my leg. If you're having a really hard time mentally and you're in Germany, you have to go through this insane process to try to get the insurance to approve your therapy session, which I would describe as near impossible to navigate when you're in a position where you need therapy.
Right. When you're mentally
Yes.
broken, or not to be crude, you don't have the capacity to
Yes.
jumping through hoops. You need
Yes.
a resolve. Yeah.
And so it took me a long time to get to the point where I could even like where I was mentally fit enough to be able to navigate that. Cause again, you have to remember I'm navigating this in a language I don't speak,
Yeah.
in a system I'm not familiar with at a time where I'm really struggling.
Mm.
And at that point, my partner's mom had died and he was very grief stricken and my mom was very ill. And it was a lot. It was, I did change jobs and small improvements was much better. And the work life balance was way better, which gave me the space to get to the point where I can actually start therapy. But it probably, from the time I had my panic attack, it probably took me like a year to even start the process of that because I needed to take care of my work situation to be able to make the space. And again, you also have to remember I was on a visa.
Mm.
So like I can't just quit. I had so many hard days. I had the space and small improvements to invest in myself because I wasn't working 60, 70-hour weeks. And that helped accelerate my journey that I'm still on today. One of the things I talk about a lot right now is grief. So we are 10 days away from the first year anniversary of my mother passing. I hid this a lot from a lot of people. My mom was on hospice care for over 3 months. She had dementia, a rare form of dementia, and dementia is a one-way disease. If you've never been through it, it's so hard to imagine what it's like to lose someone twice. When someone, it's would never pick between them, but maybe I would, but when someone dies of a physical illness like cancer or like a heart attack, you can see it happen, but they're still like this person. They're still like whatever. You can have this moment with it. But when someone's brain melts, it's this mind suck of them being in front of you and not being them. And I was flying to the US like every 6 to 8 weeks. I moved my mom twice. I got her care. I was managing her entire life from over here. And I am incredibly proud of what I did for her. It was really a tough experience to watch someone that I had looked up to turn into a vegetable, which is the only way you can describe it. And the way people die of dementia most commonly is they starve to death. I literally had to watch my mom starve to death. I had to live with the fact that my mom was living her worst nightmare. And the only consolation I had was that she had no freaking idea.
So sorry.
I had raised money our first round. And then a month after I raised that money or something like that, 2 months, I had to put my mom in hospice. And I was supposed to be like scaling this business at the time when the economy was bottoming out, people were freaking out, and my mom was disintegrating. And I was struggling. It's probably the understatement there. I was struggling and I wasn't getting the support I needed to. And My co-founder and I, we've been through coaching, we've worked on this a lot, and we've really dealt with this time. It was probably the hardest period of my life. And then she died. And I thought, honestly, this is so silly when I say it out loud, but I thought I would be okay because I'd already said goodbye to her. She'd barely been a human being, or she'd been barely more than a sack of flesh for a year. So in my mind, she was gone. I was just I used to say I'm taking care of the vessel that was formerly occupied by my mother.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure, and there was definitely a period of relief where I knew that she was better, even if she's gone. And I don't mean like in the religious sense, like her suffering was over because she suffered. And this is at the time where, again, the economy is like melting, like our pipeline dried up. I'm fighting with my co founders, where I just was like, my goal every day is just to get on bed. And meanwhile, I have to get on with customers and sales calls and just like, pretend. And it's like you get off the call and I would just cry. And I still have so many days like that. I don't have the same anger and frustration in the same way. As I said, our relationships have been repaired. We have a much better idea of how to support each other. And my co-founder, I think, has a much better idea of how challenging this. And of course, now our business is doing much better. We're growing to the point where it's actually sometimes hard to keep up with. And that always helps too. It's always easier when things are better. But there are so many days where I feel this requirement to show up with a positive face on when I just don't want to do anything.
Yeah. It's toxic positivity.
Yes. Yes. And when you talk about it in real terms, it makes people super uncomfortable. They say things like, "Oh, I'm sorry I asked." And it's like the last thing we can't talk about in society is death. And yet it's something that's going to impact us all. And when you look at the percentage of the population that is aging, there's going to be a huge wave of people who are going to have to deal with this. And when you look in the States, you look in the, we'll say, I don't know, European, North American space, what's grief care look like? It's almost a year for me now. And there are so many hard days. I hear a song, someone mentioned something casually.
Oh, the
Every,
triggers. Yeah.
yeah, we just went through Hanukkah, like Hanukkah's over and it's my first Hanukkah without her. I did my first high holy days without her. And even though I didn't do those things with her for years, because obviously she was in that place,
Doesn't matter.
it doesn't, it's the fact that I couldn't call and wish her a happy Rosh Hashanah, even if she didn't understand me. It was, I don't, it's just, I really didn't expect it to have this impact on me in the way it did. And I can't let my business crumble at the same time. Right. And yeah, so it was really hard.
I say that grief is a sneaky little bitch, and I don't mean to be cute about it. You could be totally here and something, whatever it is, just messes you up. Mess it. I mentioned to you, I think when we were corresponding, that I lost my aunt. And she was a mother or sister figure to me. And it's been just shy of a year and a half. And the other day I'm driving, I had a thought, and this is the first time this has happened. I was like, oh, I need to call her and let her know. How does that even happen? It's been a year and a half. There's no picking up the phone and calling. It was like she died all over again. It was so major all over again. And I hadn't had quite that experience where I felt like she was still alive. And I had this feeling too, which is embarrassing to say out loud, that she's coming back. I'm like, oh, when I see her again. And yeah, that's not happening. It comes with no announcement. And in a way, you don't know how it's going to affect you. It might actually be joyous. It might be horrific. You might end up in tears. And to your point, like people ask, but they're not really asking.
No,
They don't want to know the answer.
no. And the thing is, there's people think also someone dies and then you like grieve or whatever. This is, unless you have gone through this and where you are especially like the primary contact, you don't understand that actually someone dying is almost like the start of it because you have to like deal with paperwork and the burial and the like there are you it'll take you almost 2 years to actually close this person. You have to file the freaking taxes. You have to file the dead person's taxes. So it's something I'm still dealing with. There's so many things I would have done differently about this. I had hid my mom's illness for a really long time because it was used as a weapon against me at Mozilla. And so I had learned, especially as a woman in tech. But then I was going through something that was so significant. And it's like, how do you not talk about it? And we as a team did not have the tools to know how to deal with that. And so we had to like work together to learn how to support me.
Thank
Yeah.
you for opening up about that.
Yeah.
I hope when others listen to it, they'll feel comforted, seen.
Yeah. This is really why it's a struggle for me to talk about it. I mean, you can hear the emotion in my voice, and this is something I don't share, but I'm really trying to be open about it because it's such a lonely experience.
Yeah.
And it had such a huge ripple effect through my life and through my business life that if I had been in a different place and as a society had enabled our team to be able to better understand what this was, I believe it could have been a different experience. I really hope that if someone else is struggling with that, know that it is sometimes about putting one step in front of the other and just making it through to the point where you be clear enough to start to really pull yourself out. And also that you'll feel sad for forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you again for sharing. I have some rapid fire questions. How do you define success?
Now I describe doing rewarding work that matters with people that I enjoy and being able to pay my bills.
What's your path not taken?
I should have been a scientist or a mathematician or a rock star, honestly.
What 3 words would you choose to describe your career?
Zigzag, discovery, and curiosity.
What company on your resume turns the most heads?
For sure, Mozilla. And actually, working with rock stars, everybody wants to know what it's like to work with rock stars.
I have 3 labels that I'd like you to apply to 3 of your jobs. Love, ultimate fun, skip.
For sure, Skip would have been Mozilla. I loved Sierra Club. Working at a record label in your 20s is ultimate fun.
Yeah.
There was tons of bad sides to it, but I got to go some pretty epic parties.
Thank you so much, Arielle, for taking the time, opening up. I love the conversation. It was lovely to sit down with you.
Yeah, thank you. And I really love this podcast. I think it's important for people to hear that things go sideways and down all the time. And that's actually okay, even if it feels like it's not in the moment.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Effing Up. I'm your host, Deanne Reinert. If you enjoyed today's episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe on the platform you use to listen to podcasts. Share Effing Up with others, post about it on social media, and or leave a rating and review. Until next time, count your perceived failures as part of your path to success. After all, we're all effing up.